Welcome to the third session of this tutorial. In the second section, we looked at how we can add media files to an HTML document. So we looked at adding images, videos, and then audios to HTML document. But I made mention that in our next section, we're going to look at how we can apply CSS to an HTML document. So we are going to talk about classes, we talk about IDs, we talk about sections and then divisions, and some of the key elements we should look out for when building a website. Okay. So to continue, I'll just create a new folder in my tutorials folder, but I can have it anywhere on your system. So I'm going to name this project 2, but I can choose any name you prefer. Okay. So just like the first video, you can directly open this with your VS Code, or when your VS Code is opened, you can click on File, then you choose Open Folder, and then you choose the location where you created your folder. Okay. So you click on File, then you choose Open Folder, then you choose the location where you created the folder for your project. Okay. So here I'll create a new HTML file. So you click New File here, then index.html. Let me increase the font size. Alright, so here same thing, we can generate the HTML5 structure by holding Shift and then 1. Okay, so this will give you the HTML5 structure. Or you can also type HTML and then you choose 5. It's all going to generate same things for you. So we'll look at the block and then the inline elements. Alright, so block element simply means element that start on a new line on their own without you applying any CSS. For inline elements means that element will continue to be inline unless there's no room for the other element to display the content. That's the only instance where they'll move to a different line. Alright, so here I'm going to look at a few examples of them, then we'll jump into the IDs and then the classes. Alright, so here I can have a heading, let's say H1, the introduction to block and inline elements. Alright, so let me save this and then go live. Alright, so here we have introduction to block and then inline element. So if I'm to create a new heading here, okay, so let me do H2. Maybe I'm starting with block element. Alright, so here if I save this, you can see the block element started on a new line. So this is what we mean by block element. Element that starts on a new line on their own without you adding any CSS to make them display in block. Okay. So you can see we have enough room here, but this heading moved to the next line automatically. So in your HTML document, any element that starts on a new line automatically is a block element. Alright. And then next, let's say I have an input. I have an input field. I have two of them. So with the first one, let me add a placeholder here. Let's say enter username. Let me change this to password. Let me take this out for now. So placeholder, I can say enter password. Alright, so if you save these two, we have the input for the first username showing here and the second input also showing beside it. So they will continue to be inline until there's no room for the next element or the next inline element to display before they move to the next line. So this is what we refer to as the inline element. It's 8:30. So by default, they start on the new line on their own, unless you use CSS to change the default display to from inline to block. Okay, depends on how you want to arrange them on your web page. Alright. So this is just a quick intro to how block and inline elements work. So any element that starts on a new line on its own is a block. Any element that continues on the same line is an inline element. Okay. So next we are going to look at what we mean by the div section. Then we'll talk about the IDs and then classes and then why they are important or needed when you are building a web page. Okay. So let me take this down here. Alright, so on your web page you might have different sections. So maybe you can have your home page, you can have about services, contact, or any other section you want to create on your web page. So these sections must be grouped on your HTML document. All right, so usually for your home page, you can have a background video, an image, or even a color. Depends on how you are building your web page. So if you're having your background here, mostly you see your content on it. It means that the content on the page are inside one group. That's why you're able to apply the backgrounds to them. But if they are not inside the group, there's no way you can apply a background. They must be in a container. So when you give a background, a color to a container, automatically the elements displaying on it are going to have that background. Okay, so let's assume this is the home page, and then maybe I have one button here to say get started. All right, so here on my home page, I have this heading, this h2, and then this button with this text, get started. All right, so on my home page, I want this to be one group. Okay, I want this content to be my home page, so I must group this. So you can think of this as, let's say, a div as, let's say, a bag. Okay, so maybe you can have a bag, and this can be maybe the items you want to carry. So for you to be able to carry all these items, they may be plenty. If you don't keep them in a bag, it becomes difficult for you to handle them, because anytime you want to convey or carry any element, you have to carry them one after the other. But assuming you keep all these content in a bag, anywhere you carry the bag, the content follow because they are inside the bag. Okay, so you can just wrap your head around that. All right, so you can create a div here, and then you enclose it here. So you can have a div, so basically for creating divisions in your web page. So you can have a div within a div. Depends on how you want to divide the sections you have in your web page. Okay, so here we have a div, and then within the div we have the h1, we have the h2, and then the button. So now this is kind of one group. Okay, so you can call this group maybe your home page. Depends on how you are structuring your web page. So this could be your home page. All right, so now you can have another section. So let me have a heading here. So this could be maybe get in touch, or maybe get connected. All right, so let's say get connected. So this could be maybe your sign in page. This is just a basic design. Okay, so I can just have another group also here. So I can have another group. So this is the first group, and then this is the second group. So now if I want to arrange the content of my web page, it will be quite easier because they are inside group. So remember the first example I just made mention of. If you have items, you have them in bag, it's easier for you to carry them around, and then easier for you to arrange them properly. But if they are not in a bag, it is mostly difficult to arrange them properly. All right. So here you have one group. So this could be your home. You can have another group. This could be your, let's say, your get in touch, or let's say your about page. Okay, so now the next thing we'll need to look at is what we call the IDs and then the classes. Okay, so now you can identify this section, okay, by giving it an ID or a class. So same applies to this. You can identify this by giving it an ID or a class. All right, so one thing you have to know is that you can use the divisions to create the various sections you have in your web page. That's perfectly fine. Okay, but assuming you have a lot of divs in your web page, it becomes difficult for you to even read them. Okay, so this is what you could do. You could create a section. You could create something we call a section. Okay, so you're going to wrap the section around your div. So this is how your web page will look like. So you have a section. Within the section, then you have your various divisions. So you can apply save for this. You can have your section, and then within your section you can have your various divs. So now you have the home section. You can have the get started section, about section, portfolio, contacts, depending on the number of content you have on your web page. Okay, so now you can give the first section an ID or a class name. Now, why do we give them an ID or a class name? So this will be needed when we get to the CSS aspect of the program. Okay, so here I will just give this an ID. So to give any element an ID, we do that inside the opening of the element. So you could just type the ID here. You can just type ID, then you choose any name at all you want. So now this name you are going to provide is what is going to identify this section. Okay, so assuming I give this home. It means that the identifier for this section is home. Okay. So anytime you want to apply any style to the home page, you can use this identifier. That's the ID name you gave as home. And then note that the moment you give an ID to an element, you cannot repeat the same ID name for a different element. So IDs are meant to be unique. So it means that two elements cannot share the same ID name. And then same for a class. For you to give a class, you just type class. Okay. So class, then you can give the class also a different name. Okay. So for classes, they can be used by different elements. We are going to look at that when we get to the CSS aspect. Okay. And then an element can have more than one class. Okay. You can have a lot of classes. The only thing you do is to just separate them with a space. Okay. But with the ID, an element can have only one. And then the ID uniquely identifies the element, or let me say the section. But for classes, because they can be used by other sections or other elements, they don't actually uniquely identify an element. So just like someone's name, two people can share the same name, but two people can't share the same ID. So you can also relate that in your programming aspect. So now I don't need a class here, so I'll just take this out. And then for the second section, you can also give this an ID. So let's say get started. Okay. So in this section, if you want to apply any style to any of the elements within the section here, you can just use this identifier. Okay. So you just type the name of the identifier, then you can apply it to any element within it. Okay. So another thing, after giving the ID here, you can also give this a different class. Okay. So let's say this is your home page. You have given a background image to the section. So the section is covering everything. So you can give a background image to the section. So now your home page has a section. Now you have this content, or let me say text on the home page. You want this to have a different background color. Now this will be quite easier because we are now inside one group. Okay. So you have another group here. So if you give this, you can choose to give this a class or not. That depends on you, but mostly I use a class here. So you can have a class here. You can call it, let's say, container, wrapper, any name at all you want. So classes can be any name at all, but I have to make sure the names actually corresponds to what we are using it for. So in this case, it's just serving as a wrapper, or let me say a container for this element. So I'm just choosing this name, container, but it can be anything: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. It doesn't matter. It could be any name at all, just for you to identify what you want to apply the style to. So here I just have this container here. So anytime I want to give a background to the element here, I want them to have a background color, I can just apply that property to the container. So on the home page, I'll have a background as maybe my image, and then this content will have a nice rectangular background color. Okay. So same for these elements too. You can also give this a class. Depends on how you want to apply your style. All right. So in a nutshell, this is how we can work with block and then inline elements, and then this is how we can add the IDs and then classes to an HTML element. So in the next section, we are going to look at how we can apply CSS to an HTML document. So we'll be using this same code. We'll not be creating a new file for that. So stay tuned, and then we continue in the next section.